Welcome back. And I'm very pleased to say we're continuing a tremendously important conversation with Dr. Bradley Thayer, a member of our Committee on the Present Danger China and one of the great experts in this country on the Chinese Communist Party and its ambitions. And Brad, I wanted to ask you about this speech by the then Minister of Defense, Chi Hao-chen. Um, do you credit the idea that the Chinese Communist Party would actually envision using biological weapons, as he indicated was the case, for the purposes of depopulating the United States and colonizing it? And that anything that is made to look as though they're really preoccupied with Taiwan is really just a feint for that larger purpose against what they consider to be their main enemy, namely us.
Well, this is a very important issue, Frank, as you mentioned. 3 points with respect to this. First, we need to recognize that that China is the enemy of the United States, and so when we have speeches, and this speech is not alone, and we should recognize, of course, that there is a pattern of expression along these lines directed at the United States. China recognizes us as their enemy, and we should do the same. So the remarks of the Chinese defense minister are fully in keeping with their broader strategy of unrestricted warfare. Frank, I know you know this very well, and you've covered it many times, but its importance cannot be underestimated. The Chinese approach to the United States is to attack us in an all-azimuth manner. That is, illegally, in ideological warfare, in economic warfare, in kinetic warfare in time, but to use every weapon at their disposal, including biological weapons, to undermine the United States, the homeland of the United States, as well as, of course, our allies in international politics. So because they see us as their enemy, we should greatly appreciate in a way that we have not thus far, certainly, that they will employ every mechanism to undermine, to attack the American people. We should also consider, Frank, that fentanyl, and that is the drugs, the opiate crisis, has a Chinese origin. And the Chinese are doing their utmost to accelerate that. So we see, and with an open border, of course, that we're very likely to have very soon, we'll see the expansion of drugs, of course, of opiates, other dangerous narcotics, come across the southern border. This should be seen
as a form
of
chemical warfare.
It's a form of chemical weapon, indeed.
100,000 Americans being lost, I think, last year
indeed.
to it.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right to point that out as well. And just let me say, I think you meant to say overestimate the importance of all of this. It is really vital that we understand this is not something we're making up. This is not something that we're conjuring. This is something that they have made abundantly clear is their policy, and they are far advanced in exercising it. And the biological attack, I personally believe that COVID-19 represents, may have been a dress rehearsal for something far worse. Brad, let me talk about something else that you've recently written about, because it's both important in its own right, and it sets up very nicely the conversation I'm going to have in our next segment with former Major Fred Galvin. When you look at what is critical to our national security in the face of the sorts of threats you've just talked about, it clearly comes down to the readiness, the professionalism, the esprit de corps, the quality, the deterrent value, in short, of the United States military. Talk a little bit about one of the things that you think is critical to all of that and how it compares to the Chinese People's Liberation Army.
Well, certainly, Frank. Again, this is a critical issue. It does not receive the attention it deserves. And this is to ensure that the United States sustains the right type of civil-military relations in this country that we've had now for generations. And that is that the civilian leadership, Frank, you know this well from your time in the Pentagon, The civilian leadership provides oversight and it provides direction, but it leaves the military domain to the military, which is a fundamental component of what's called objective civilian control. In countries that we see around the world, like China, they have politicized militaries, and that is where the military is a tool of the Communist Party of China, for example, or of the Soviet military was, of course, of the Soviet Union. And they are not professional militaries. And that affects their behavior. In their ability to, in their military effectiveness. So one of our great strengths has been our tradition of a professional military in the operating under the principles of objective civilian control. Elements that erode that are when the military becomes politicized, when the civilians reach into the military domain and start requiring changes. In how the military structures itself, how it trains itself, et cetera. So we have seen, of course.
Well, it's culture, among other things.
Indeed.
And the indoctrination that's being applied to them on critical race theory, for example,
Indeed.
is a rampant example of that.
The importance of its history, appreciating its history, its traditions, and its culture, as you said, all are extremely important in ensuring that that military domain is the best that it can be. That, and again, that is our great strength. And as we chip away at this, as we chip away at the foundation with the teachings, as you said, of critical race theory, of other elements to
social experimentation, the transgender agenda, and on and on. Yeah, it is politicizing. And Brad, just to put a fine point on it, the Chinese Communist Party, like the Soviet Union, has political commissars integrated into its military units. And I think it's always a question as to who has more power in the command chain within those units. Is it the nominal military brass, or is it actually the political cadre that are there monitoring everybody and making sure that everybody conforms? Talk a little bit about the implications for the Chinese People's Liberation Army of having that kind of structure, and the danger that we may be replicating it in ours to some extent with the kinds of practices we've just discussed.
Indeed, it is a politicized force, and that weakens its combat effectiveness. The military effectiveness of the People's Liberation Army and the other elements of the Chinese military are hindered by that structure. And the corruption that entails, where junior officers have to pay bribes, if you will, to senior officers in order to simply maintain their positions or to be considered for promotion or many other elements. This greatly hinders the professionalization of the People's Liberation Army. And from our perspective, of course, that's a positive element. But we should be aware that that's a cancer, that once that is introduced, it will metastasize. And there will always be another demand or another effort to continue a political expansion of civilian interference, in essence, in the military domain, which weakens military effectiveness. So we have witnessed this, and again, the Chinese have this system, and it is to their great detriment, which keeps it from being a truly professional military force, and that would greatly adverse their combat effectiveness.
Yeah. This is good news for us. The bad news is if we replicate it here, we're going to find perhaps the advantage we might otherwise enjoy with a self-criticizing and healing military,
an honest military,
diminished. That's right, an honest military. Brad, we are out of time. We have to leave it at that for the moment, but we will have you back soon to talk about this further. And thank you for your help in teeing up, as I say, the conversation with Major Galvin, which we will have momentarily about what was done to his unit of special operators in Afghanistan and beyond. That and more straight ahead.